Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skyer. And we begin this morning with the latest on the trade war. U.S. President Donald Trump is open to making a deal with the European Union. However, until that happens, the new tariffs will stay in place. Trump mentioned several conditions for their removal, including the EU moving to purchase more American energy resources. Now, the EU would have to commit to buying $350 billion worth of U.S. energy to get Donald Trump to cancel the sweeping tariffs. Trump's wave of levies prompted Brussels to offer the United States 0-for-0 tariffs on cars and industrial goods, but the proposal was rejected by the president late on Monday.
And yet they send millions of cars in a year, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMWs. They're sending millions and millions of cars into the U.S., but we don't have a car that's been sold to the European Union or other places, but let's go for the European Union. And it's not going to be that way. It's got to be fair and reciprocal. It's got to be fair. It's not fair. We have a deficit with the European Union of $350 billion, and it's going to disappear fast. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that can disappear easily and quickly is they're going to have to buy our energy from us because they need it. They're going to have to buy it from us. They can buy it. We can knock off $350 billion in 1 week.
Trump slapped 20% tariffs on the European Union and a minimum 10% levy on other trade partners. Now, in response to the move, the European Union is expected to introduce a 25% duty on a wide range of U.S. exports, including iron, steel, aluminum, and vehicles. Now, if the countermeasures pass parliamentary votes in EU capitals, most of the tariffs are expected to take place by May 16.
We are open for negotiations, and that in parallel we are preparing a potential list for retaliation and other measures for retaliation if this is necessary. We prefer to have a negotiated solution. The relevant partners, Maroš Šefčovič, our Trade Commissioner, and Secretary of Commerce Latnik, for example, are in very close contacts on that topic. And it is clear that negotiations have to go deep into technical details. So this has to be solved first, and then comes the next step. But all the different instruments are on the table, and we have to see how the negotiations go to decide which instrument we are using finally.
Now, as the EU is getting ready to respond to Trump's tariffs, the Polish press agency is reporting that the European Commission will propose retaliatory tariffs up to 25% on American goods. Now, the draft Commission decision obtained by the news agency contains 67 pages, and it has tables with lists of goods to be subjected to EU duties. Reportedly, the vast majority of the items will undergo 25% custom tariffs rather than 10%. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič told reporters on Monday that the range of U.S. tariffs imposed last week by the Trump administration is nearing 380 billion euros worth of EU exports to the United States. The commissioner added that European Union would start collecting a first tranche of duties on U.S. imports from April 15 and a second wave on May 15. And as the world witnessed wild market swings triggered by new U.S. tariffs on Monday, former Polish Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki told TVP World in an exclusive interview that he remains optimistic. Despite mounting fears of a full-blown trade war, Bielecki believes Europe still has a strategic window of opportunity.
Well, I think I'm in the medium term, I'm an optimist, and I think that the Europeans could come out from this situation even with some rebalance or a little bit restructure economy, so it should be good. Okay, if some let's call it quite politely unnecessary welfare policy could be a little bit adjusted, it's only good for the competitiveness of the economy.
The U.S. stock market is going through a volatile day of trading, with indexes seeing gains after opening losses, only to go back into the red later. Now, this comes after heavy losses on Asian and European markets, and with Donald Trump threatening even higher tariffs on Chinese goods in response to Beijing's retaliatory tariffs.
At opening, U.S. stock markets universally saw losses on top of those incurred at closing on Friday. There was some recovery after reporting came in that U.S. President Donald Trump might put a pause on some of his tariffs even before they come into effect. However, later in the day, Donald Trump took to his social media platform Truth Social to double down.
If China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8, 2025, the United States will impose additional tariffs on China of 50%.
Before Trump's announcement, the S&P 500 went from a 4.7% drop shortly after the start of trading all the way to a surge of 3.4%. It then quickly gave up all of it to revert to a drop of 1.3% later. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 736 points, or 1.9%, and the Nasdaq Composite was 1.3% lower. Both also whipped through intense reversals, with Dow going from a loss of 1,700 points to a gain of nearly 900 points.
Polish President Andrzej Duda is in Estonia for day 2 of his 3-day state visit. The aim of his trip is to strengthen relations between Warsaw and Tallinn, one of Poland's key partners in the Baltic Sea region. Now, the official part of the second day of his visit will begin with the meeting between the Polish president, his wife, and the Estonian First Lady. Later in the day, Duda is set to discuss bilateral relations with the Estonian Prime Minister and the Speaker of the Estonian Parliament. Parliamentary cooperation, the security situation in the region, and joint efforts within NATO and the European Union will be high on the agenda. On Wednesday, Duda will travel to the Cyber Range CR-14 training ground created to train and test cyber defense mechanisms. The facility is now being used by NATO members to better prepare for any incoming cyber attacks. Moving on to Ukraine, in his nightly address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Kiev's troops are still present in the Belgorod region, a territory of the Russian Federation.
Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky also reported today on the front line our presence in the Kursk region and in the Belgorod region. We continue active operations in the border areas on enemy territory, and this is absolutely fair. The war must return to where it came from. Our primary objective remains protecting our land and shielding our communities in Sumy and Kharkiv regions from Russian occupiers. The Commander-in-Chief reported on the activity of our units along the borderline in the so-called gray zone and directly on enemy territory. Importantly, thanks to the bravery and resilience of our warriors in the Kursk region, thanks to the entire Kursk operation, we've been able to reduce pressure on other parts of the front, particularly in the Donetsk region.
On Monday, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha called for an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to be convened today. His appeal came in response to a recent Russian ballistic missile strike on Kryvyi Rih, which killed 9 Ukrainian children.
Ukraine has initiated an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council and a special meeting of the OSCE Permanent Council to bring Russian crimes to the forefront. Both meetings will be convened tomorrow and will help to advance peace efforts and accountability. A robust international response to Russian atrocities is critical. Such terror should never be normalized. We call for both strong condemnation and firm action.
It will calm down a lot of issues which were unnecessarily emotional, said chairman of the Polish-Ukrainian Parliamentary Group and former Polish ambassador to Canada, Marcin Bosacki, referring to the official start of the exhumation process in the village of Puzhniki in western Ukraine. The exhumations, looking to unearth the remains of the Polish victims of the Volhynia massacres, are still a highly sensitive issue for both Poland and Ukraine.
Poles did not or have not demanded much. They just demanded, both society and the families of the victims and the state as such. The Christian gesture to have possibility to bury their relatives or compatriots. And finally, the starting, I think it will calm down a lot of issues which were unnecessarily emotional, and let's say it frankly, also used by the common enemy, which is Russia. So I think from this decision, which I hope will be conducted smoothly and swiftly, only good things will develop for strengthened Polish-Ukrainian cooperation.
And moving on now to Georgia, where the ruling party, Georgian Dream, is taking further steps to curb the civil liberties of its citizens. A new bill banning LGBT marches, calling the measure central to the party's core beliefs, is yet another sign of the country drifting further and further away from the EU. Sasha Farbach has more in the next story.
The streets of Tbilisi have not remained quiet these past months. Amid recent protests marking Georgia's 1991 independence referendum, another wave of unrest may be brewing. Parliamentary Speaker Shalva Papuashvili of the ruling Georgian Dream Party has announced a bill banning LGBT marches and rainbow flags, calling the measures central for the party's core beliefs.
This law does not reflect current, temporary, changing ideas and ideologies, but is based on common sense, historical experience, and centuries-old Christian, Georgian, and European values.
This comes after a controversial 2024 law which limits LGBT rights, including a ban on LGBT propaganda and same-sex marriage. The new bill may further escalate tensions in Georgian society, with experts saying its consequences could be far-reaching.
It has a psychological effect and influence on the Georgian civil society, and not only. This is a legislative initiative that was introduced about a year ago, but in terms of its implementation, we don't see a huge progress. It has a psychological effect in order to weaken most likely civil society, who get funding from international donors.
The proposed legislation is likely to pass as the ruling conservative Georgian Dream Party holds a strong government majority, while opposition parties and civil society face increasing suppression. Actions have drawn criticism from the United Nations.
Georgia, we are concerned by the restrictive laws and regulations passed by Parliament this week, which amplify existing risks to freedom of expression, association, equality, and civic space, stifle political pluralism. We urge Georgia to uphold its international human rights laws obligations.
Despite ongoing protests, demonstrations, and growing Western criticism, experts believe that Tbilisi's government will remain steadfast, refusing to yield to public pressure.
The complex of these actions create a reality in which the Georgian government will have a consolidated power without any foes and rivals. There might be some reactions, but these reactions fail to bring tangible effects. The Georgian Dream understands that quite well because of the lack of political opposition.
The proposal follows a recent ban on LGBT marches by Hungarian officials and closely mirrors tactics seen in Russia, where policies against minorities have been used to strengthen political control. As Georgia moves forward with this legislation, it raises concerns about the growing influence of similar autocratic strategies, potentially distancing the country from its Western path. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
And that completes this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, and stay with us for more news and features.